All right. Hey, welcome everyone. It is time for a review, but this is going to be a short review. One, there's not a lot to talk about on this particular video. I'm going to review because I'm only doing one section of this particular video because this one section was cringeworthy. I might talk about it more. We'll see how it goes. We'll see who shows up. First, welcome everybody out there. John, Rotfeast, et al. Welcome. This particular video it comes from a channel that I've never heard of before called Professor Plink. I don't know anything about this person. Not really interested in knowing anything about this person. I did leave a comment on their video several days ago. No response. Just by going by what they're having to say on some of the other comments, I just don't think they have any understanding of atheism whatsoever. But, be that as may, we're going to talk about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the video, and then I'm going to look at the comments that he made on the video itself and the comment that I left, see what you guys think, got any questions. But let me give you a brief synopsis. Brief synopsis is basically Professor Plink plays a segment from Capturing Christianity, which is Bertuzzi. Cameron Bertuzzi, and he plays a segment where he's interviewing one of my all-time favorite philosophers by the name of Dr. Graham Oppy. I've had Oppy on my channel. He's an amazing, amazing philosopher. He's probably the quintessential expert, I think, on atheism. I don't really know too many philosophers that would think that they know more about atheism than Graham Oppy, since he literally writes the textbooks on these topics for Cambridge and a few other universities. So he plays a clip and then he just gets cringe. And this is what I'm saying, that just because you're an atheist or you're an unbeliever, it doesn't indemnify you or automatically exclude you from really bad critical thinking and really doing the same kind of cringe that we see creationists use. And again, not all creationists are cringe. There's a lot of creationists out there that I respect. I don't agree with them, obviously, but I respect them. But the fruit on the ground, average creationists you find in Facebook groups, of course, they're not that hard to refute, right? And they are cringe because they say some of the most ridiculous things against evolution. I get that. Capturing Christianity is not one of those people. Sure, he can troll. Sorry, Cameron, you control this. Let's lay it all on the table. Cameron likes to troll. That is true. However, he does have some very, very well-known, influential people on his channel, and he has some really good discussions with them. So, be that as may. And so he did get Dr. Graham Oppy on, and this is the clip that Professor Plink is weighing in on, and it's bad. So make sure you can all hear me. Make sure you guys can hear the clip when I play it. I have the sound on here. Everything looked fine before I started. And let's see what Professor Plink has to say here. Here we go.
So let's move on from there and jump over to another cringe from Capturing Christianity and our old buddy Cameron Bertuzzi.
So what is the definition of an atheist?
It'll sound slightly provocative because we don't have the context here. So I think that properly we should define theism as the view that there's at least one God, and atheism is no gods. To identify all of the positions, I think the terminology is most simple and you get the kind of cleanest structure if you define it the way I do. Atheists, then, are people who believe that there are no gods.
Thug life. Yeah. Oppy is thug, man. Oppy is the thug of philosophy of religion. No doubt. He is the GOAT. I don't know anybody in modern day contemporary analytical philosophy that has handled Graham Oppy in his prolific writing and the amount of detail and understanding this man has. I've tried to read his work. There's one paper by him. I get past the first two sentences. I'm like, I'm done. He's really brilliant. So Cameron's asking him, what is the definition of atheism? And what Graham Oppy is doing is basically giving reasons why he believes, as I do, as any intelligent person would, that atheism is best utilized, or I hate to use the word defined because it's not prescribed, right? These are descriptions. But Oppy is arguing that the best usages of the term atheism is in line with the philosophy, is in line with the belief that God does not exist. And the reason why Dr. Oppy argues this is that he holds his three epistemic dispositions, right? He holds to that model that if theism is the proposition there is a God, then it makes sense to have a position that is the negation of that, the contradictory set of that, which is the belief there isn't a God. And of course, there are people that believe neither, which are called agnostics. So he likes that kind of structure. I do too. I think that's, that definitely captures the rational epistemic space involved. There's a fourth epistemic space, which is you believe both God exists and does not exist at the same time. But I think we all agree that that is an epistemic contradiction. So we couldn't call that rational. But as far as the rational positions of God, you believe God exists, you believe God does not exist, or you can believe neither. Those are the three epistemic statuses. And so he's arguing that he thinks that atheism should be held in that regard when you hear the word atheism. And up to just a few decades ago, it was. Stanford Encyclopedia notes this, Dr. Draper notes this, that until recently, nobody ever questioned when he used the word atheism. It was somebody who, or the position that there is no God, or an atheist, which is somebody who believes there's no God. And so these were unambiguous terms back then. Now, he's not saying that this is prescribed, okay? Cameron's not, although Cameron probably maybe wanting him to. Appy hedges his argument on this. I know, because like I said, I had him on my show and I asked him this very same questions. He believes very strongly that these are the best ways to go. But if you read his books, he definitely does insert it as you must do this. There's no metaphysical necessity of why a word has to be used the way it is, right? And so you can't argue atheism must be used in some context. You can't say atheism must be the lack of belief that God exists. No, it could be anything you want. You want to define atheism to be the belief that there's a God. You could do that if you wanted to, because these words are just signifiers. In the Frege church ontology version of linguistics, you basically have a word that you say, which is your locution. That word has a sense that connotes something to somebody, which is your understanding of the word. And then that word either points to something in real life or it doesn't, something that has ontology or it doesn't, something that exists or it doesn't. So if I say, I believe there's a cat on the mat, that statement can be evaluated as true or false if there's a cat on the mat. If the word cat represents some object that is in reality, that's the truth maker to make that proposition true. And there's a relationship with all this. And so the theist says that the word God points to something. There is something that the word God is talking about that does exist. And the atheist says, no, the word God is a concept like anything else, but it doesn't have any ontological status that of a creature or being that exists that it refers to, right? And that's the difference. That's the difference between theism and atheism as held in philosophy and religion standard. And so that's what Dr. Appy is kind of relating to Bertuzzi here. And I absolutely agree with him. I mean, he's completely right. So Glenn says, I don't know if there's an older clip, but I think Plink would agree that as long as he isn't saying atheism is a knowledge claim rather than a belief. Well, I don't know anybody who would say these are knowledge claims except for people that really have no understanding of basic epistemology, right? When you make a statement, there's this a small group of people that have this fundamental misunderstanding that if you say a statement, they say that's a knowledge claim. No, it's not. All statements in these propositions are considered dosastic in nature, meaning they're beliefs. They're not considered by any default to be knowledge claims. If I say X equals X, I'm stating that as my belief. It's the same thing as saying I believe X equals X. Now, if I want to raise that to the next level and say I know X equals X, I can do that. And I can do that, and I would. I know X equals X. If I want to raise that even higher to a certainty level, I can do that, and I would. I cannot be wrong about that. I argue that something like the law of identity is so correct that it's impossible in any possible world to be wrong on that. It's a logical metaphysical necessity that is one of the few things you can claim certainty on. But certainty, I think, when it comes to maths and logic, you can utilize the word certainty, and it actually has context where it makes sense. And I think the law of identity is certainly, if you're going to talk about certainty, it certainly is the quintessential, I think, exemplar of what we mean by certainty. Because if you're wrong on X equals X, everything falls apart after that, right? Because of the principle of explosion. So you got to start this with some types of certainties. And even though it's a priori knowledge, it's to be demonstrated, and one could even argue it's an axiom. And if by the way, if it's an axiom, it's a little more difficult to justify knowledge. But I think you can still do it. But anyways, Appy's arguing at this point that the best way to use the word atheism is in the positive sense. So let's see what Professor Plink has to say about this.
Atheists then are people who believe that
Get a little funk.
gods.
I actually like that
Well,
music.
slap me around and call me Susan.
Hi, Susan.
I warned you, Susan.
Susan? Oh, that's not nice. That's just mean.
Are we really back on this thing again? Why
Yeah.
are you theists always and forever trying to insist upon an alternate definition of atheism?
All right. First, and I will clarify, Professor Plink did acknowledge that he did not think Oppie was a theist, because people were getting after him. One of the reasons I was doing this video, and this was before he even updated this on his video, we're like, dude, you think Graham Oppie is a theist? Are you out of your mind? Right? That's just ludicrous. Or some closet theist. So he's clarified it, and he has said, and I'm going to take him at his word. I'm not going to call him out for it. He says that in the video description that he knows Dr. Oppie is a theist. So he's talking about Cameron. But it doesn't hold any water, because Cameron, yes, is a theist, but he's not trying to change anything. Professor Plink doesn't seem to realize that the word atheist has been used in academia for the last 400 years. I can trace it back. 400 years. To be the position of the denial of the existence of God. Always had a positive epistemic status till around 1972. And you all know what happened in 1972, right? Can anybody tell me what happened in 1972 and who, what? Because I wrote my paper refuting it. Let me know if you can put it in the live chat. What happened in 1972? Who wrote what paper that started changing this? And it wasn't until Michael Martin and George Smith, who wasn't even a philosopher, but they got a hold of it and they started running with it. And then the Atheist Experience picked it up on their cable access program, and American Atheist picked it up, and all these atheist channels and all these atheist groups started going, oh, atheism is just a lack of belief. And I'm like 10 years ago going, what? No, that's not the common understanding, and nor should it be. So, Professor Plink already starts off with this, oh, theists always tried to change something. No, it was actually an atheist. An atheist by the name Dr. Flew, who later became a deist, as many of you know, that tried to change by giving an entreatise that he wanted atheism to be thought of as just merely not believing in God. He even wrote this in his paper. He said in the normal usage of the word atheism in English is the position of there is no God, to believe there is no God. He wrote this in his paper. And he said, but I want it to be understood differently. I want it to be understood as merely not believing. And of course, that didn't get a lot of traction. A lot of philosophers were like, no, there's some issues with this. Dr. Burgess Jackson wrote a brilliant paper many years later in 2017 called Redefining Redefining Atheism with Burden of Truth, I think was his paper. Rethinking the Burden of Atheism. And Rethinking the Presumption of Atheism and the Burden of Truth or something. Don't quote me. But he definitely shows some errors in Dr. Flew's thinking. But there have been other papers out there before then trying to explain to people why we won't want to accept Flew's argument that it should be changed. But again, this was an atheist that wanted to change, Professor Plink. This wasn't a theist. So you're automatically kind of going down the wrong path here. So
Look, it's not hard. It's pretty damn basic, actually. The guy even gets the definition of theism right, so he's almost there.
Almost there. Oh, yeah. Yes, the Rethinking the Presumption of Atheism. That was Dr. Burgess Jackson's paper. Highly recommended. Great paper. So he gets it right. Now, again, what do you mean by right and wrong? These words have usages, right? The term theism actually has more than one usage, even in the philosophy of religion, because we could be talking about the monotheistic type in a classical schema, or we could be talking about any type of deity in a non-classical theist. So I'd use the word theism in the non-classical sense. You don't have to. There's no right or wrong with that. So when he says, oh, he gets it right, well, basically, I think he's trying to say that, yes, he understands that this is how this word is typically used in philosophy of religion. Theism is the position that you believe there's some type of God in the global sense, right?
Theism means the belief in a god or gods, yes.
Okay.
But the prefix a means not or without.
This is why I hate doing these things, guys. I really hate doing these things, because when I hear things like this, I weep for humanity. I mean, tears, you could almost see them like streaming down my face right now. I'm almost physically in pain. The reason being is because this is a person who clearly has never actually looked into this particular thing when it comes to atheism on the Greek alpha privative. Clearly has not. I mean, Google something and boom, automatically knows about it. Because this is not exactly the case at all. The A is a Greek alpha privative. Yes, it is to mean generally without or not. However, in the term, and I'm going to be, by the way, I'm going to be explaining this tomorrow on Dr. Braxton Hunter's channel on Trinity Radio. Yes, I've made it. Hallelujah. Praise the God that may or not exist. I have gotten a spot on Trinity Radio to talk to Dr. Braxton Hunter about my paper. And one of the things I'll be talking about is this very subject, that the A in the term atheos does not mean without. It's not meant to be without. It did have a connotation for the etymological derivatives of the word, but it wasn't the person was without belief in God. This is where every single theist or atheist that I've talked to or seen gets this so fundamentally wrong. It was not without belief. I don't know how many times I can say this. You can go read The Battling of the Gods by Tim Whitmarsh, and many other sources. So this is what the original term atheos represented. It referred to a group of people called Christians. Yeah. This was probably up to the 5th century, 4th or 5th century, I guess. But it referred to a group of Christians that did not worship the state-sanctioned monotheistic Roman pantheonic gods. They were without gods because the gods had denied them favor. They still believed in God. They believed in the Christian God, the monotheistic Yahweh, Jehovah, that being. They were called atheos because they were without favor of the gods. The gods had forsaken them because they no longer were being worshipped by the Christians, but they still believed in a God. This is how the original term atheos was used. So it wasn't without belief in a God. This is, again, the common mistake that many atheists make. It was without favor of the gods. That usage is not really how we came about in the English language to know about this word. That word became part of the English lexicon around the 16th century from a French word. And I'm going to butcher this, all you French people out there. I'm so sorry, I don't speak French. But I'm going to say it's pronounced something along Atheisme. I'm going to get close. Somebody's, and it's afraid it's probably the closest that probably can speak French. Atheisme, is that close? But that particular word, for the last 400 years in the 16th century, meant to deny or the denial of God's existence. And so the English version of the word atheist comes from the denial of God existing for the last 400 plus on years. This is what Flew wanted to change when he wrote his paper on the presumption of atheism, or the presumption of atheism. So the term a, or the suffix, or the prefix, that is affixed to the word, doesn't mean without. It even says in Stanford's Encyclopedia by Dr. Draper, don't think of it as without, think of it as not. Professor Plink gets that part right. This is where he gets it wrong, though. And I'm going to play a little bit further because I want to see what he says on it, but I'll tell you what he gets it wrong when he uses the not.
It is a prefix of negation.
Yes.
Such as in asexual, meaning without sexuality.
No, now you just conflated
amoral,
the term. No.
meaning without morality.
No.
Not immoral, which would be holding negative morals, but without moral thought or concern at all.
Well, that
Agnostic, well, Gnostic means knowing,
No.
so agnostic
No.
means without knowing.
No. I hate this, guys. I really hate this. None of the above. It's just wronger than wrong. I mean, it's just practically wrong. It's potato. It's just a little potato wrong. Or turnip. I'm going to use turnip. Turnip's a better word. Potato has other connotations that I think are demeaning. But I'll put turnip. It's turnip wrong. The reason is that he conflated not without and without again. The negation, Professor Plink, doesn't affect the predication. The negation does not affect the epistemic disposition. The negation is on the proposition. You have P or you have not P. The law of negation is P or not P is always true. And so you either have the proposition or you have the negation of the proposition. So when it's talking about not, it's talking about the negation of the proposition of theism. And you've already agreed that theism is the belief that God exists. So the proposition is God exists, some type of God exists. And if you believe that to be true, then you have the belief that there's a God, and therefore they will call that theist. Atheism is the belief of the negation of the proposition. What's the negation of the proposition God exists? It's God does not exist. And I know you guys knew that. And so if the proposition is God does not exist and you predicate that with belief, you get the belief that God does not exist. That's atheism. And so Professor Plink, you're talking about cringe, but yet you're unbelievably cringe on this because you got the basics of just so wrong about the Greek alpha privative of A that you're relating it to without, and then for some reason you just strangely use it to say it's without as you use it with other words. Well, yeah, like a front doesn't mean without front. A breast doesn't mean without breast. A front has different usages. A has different usages. You can't just throw it out there like Flint did. Matter of fact, that's where he got these from. Asymmetrical means not symmetrical. Okay, but that's how it's used in that word. You have never made an argument that's because the word symmetrical with the A in front of it means not symmetrical. It has to be used that way for all other words. That's a fallacy called the etymological fallacy. That just because it was used in some way throughout, its etymology, that it has to be used similarly. No, it can be used many different ways. It's not logical or rational to say, oh, because it's asymmetrical, it means this. It must mean that in atheist. It doesn't, because if you look at how it was used originally as atheos in the Greek, that's not what it meant. It didn't mean without gods. It meant without the favor of the gods, as I've already explained, which is, again, a common misconception that atheists have. Some atheists have. And then he gets into the agnostic thing. And let me go a little bit further on this because this is so cringe.
So if theism means believing in God or gods, then atheism literally means without belief in God or God.
No, it does not mean literally that, man. In fact, go read Roe. I believe it was. Was it Roe? I don't remember. But there's actually a place on Wiki, I think it's the 5th citation, that actually says, no, the literal translation is the belief that God does not exist. And so you can't just say, oh, I'm going to take A, which means not sticking in front of a word, which is your A, you're fixing the prefix to the word and say, oh, it must mean this. No, you cannot rationally say that that's what the word means literally, because again, words can mean different things even literally, right? And so when you say the word atheos, you're not saying without the belief in God. You're saying without theism, without the gods giving favor to them. That's actually what I was, like I said, originally referred to. So there's no relationship there. By the way, Rotfest, was my pronunciation super wrong? Atheism. Atheisma. Is that how you pronounce it in French? Atheisma? He's Canadian. So he was from like the Quebec in Nova Scotia region. They learn French, don't they? So it's atheisma. Man, this is why I stick with English, people. Look, I know how to spell it, so whatever, close enough. And where the accent goes. But anyways, put the word out there. Can you, Christopher, so somebody can see it? But anyways, that's where the original derivation from the English context comes from, is the French word. Theisma. There you go. Close enough. Which meant the denying or denial of God's existence. So anyways, he gets into the whole Gnostic atheism thing. Let me make it clear. Again, Professor Plink, you should have done your research on this because it's so super cringe. You cannot even make those correlations because even Wiki tells people don't relate them. They're not related. The term agnostic or agnosticism was a neologism. It was a term coined by Thomas Henry Huxley in the 19th century. He made it up. He just made it up. And he didn't even use the word gnosis. Another common mistake. Believe it or not, if you go read Robert Flint's book, who was a contemporary at the time, called Agnosticism, he points out that Huxley didn't use gnosis. What he used was nous. And what he wanted nous to represent was the illusion of having knowledge. He thought that the theist and the atheist of the time both did not have any standings by which they could make any claims to even knowledge or belief, because his original version of agnosticism was a normative epistemic principle that you could not believe, or you should not, or ought not to believe anything. It was actually normative, as in ought. It was, you ought not to believe anything without proper scientific grounding. It was original formulations of the scientific method. It was his epistemology. It was, if you don't have good scientific reason to believe in something, you shouldn't believe in it. But of course, we realize there are other things that why we could have a belief that are not contingent solely upon science. There's other types of knowledge out there. There's other types of reasonings, such as prudentialism and pragmatism and other things. So you don't have to have science to believe in something. Science is very good. Don't get me wrong. I love science, and I think science knowledge is incredible. But certain things dealing with philosophy, you cannot use science for, unfortunately. And what Huxley did was he wanted a normative epistemic principle to say, look, theists and atheists have no scientific reasons to even say anything about God, whether they believe or don't believe, and whatever. There's nothing to. He was just like, they can't make any claims about God. They can't say God exists. They can't say God does not exist. They may not even know what they're talking about because, the vagary, there's not vagary, so the vagueness of the term God to some people. But that's why he coined the term. It had nothing to do with gnosis. It had nothing to do with Gnostic, which, again, doesn't even mean about knowledge. I know everybody goes to Google and says, oh, look, Steve, Gnostic says knowledge. Well, yeah, you Google food's strong, but, go get an education and go take a class in these things or read a book. The term Gnostic did not refer to knowledge in the epistemic sense. The term Gnostic referred to a very specific type of what's called hidden knowledge or esoteric knowledge. It was something that was almost like divinus sensus, if you want to look at the Christian view, that was instilled in us. But this knowledge that was given to us was given by was it a deity? A lesser aeon, she was called, by the name Sophia in the Gnostic literature. So if you go read Pistis Sophia, if you go read On the Origin of the World, it talks about Sophia falling from grace, from Plamor, which was the heavens. And what she did, she instilled on us this knowledge of this unknown God. And what the unknown God was the creator of the universe, creator of the heavens, but not the universe. The creator of the universe was this trickster god called Yaldabaoth. The citation is Roe. Okay, cool. Thank you. I wasn't sure. There's more than one, but one of them I think was Roe, and I think there's another one. It's 5 and 6. I'm not looking anything up right now. Sorry, I'm lazy. But the trickster god Yaldabaoth is what created this heavens, and so she wanted people to know that the creator of the actual universe was this unknown God that people had forgotten about. So she gave us this divine knowledge, and then her messenger, which is the syzygy named Jesus. Well, she was a syzygy of Jesus. She was relationship to Jesus. Jesus was the messenger of all this in the Gnostic literature. And so that's what Gnostic meant. Did it just mean knowledge? Right now, however it means in Greek language, that's fine. I don't speak Greek. But I'm telling you how the word gnosis was understood in the academic literature. It was not referred to, you can't just say you have gnosis of something. It doesn't mean you know something. Gnosis, again, was something that was instilled in humanity. It was esoteric knowledge. You can't just be throwing these terms around and expect people to go read the literature and understand what they mean by it. If you just think knowledge and gnosis are the same thing, you're not going to understand any of the Gnostic literature because it's not the same. And so agnostic, you can't just throw A in front of Gnostic and think that's how the word was coined. It wasn't. He didn't use Gnostic. He used Gnos. Again, a common mistake that some atheists make.
That's it. Period. Simple application
Period,
of a simple prefix to a simple word.
That you got wrong, Professor Plink. This is why I say you might want to go out and read a book on this stuff because you're just completely wrong.
But of course theists want to try to force atheism into a positive belief stance.
What? Well,
and it's easy to see why.
Why?
Theists are always on the defensive because they're in a position to have to explain and justify their positive belief in a deity.
Okay, and what's wrong with that? I agree with you so far. Theists should justify it. They don't have to prove anything unless they say they can prove it. If you say, hey, Steve, I can prove God exists, I'm going to be all ears. I'm going to be like, what's your proof? And show me an actual proof, not just, your beliefs. I want an actual logical proof in some form of logic that I can go look to see if I can figure out if it's valid and sound. But yeah, theists will let's say there's a God. What's wrong with having atheists going, hey, you're wrong. Let me show you why you're wrong. There is no God. If you want theists to do their justification of why they believe there's a God, why would you not want atheists to have a justification to be rational that there is no God? Why would you take that away from them, Professor Plink? That's not atheist. I mean, that's just not theists out there saying that. That's theist, atheist, agnostics, anybody that understands epistemology and that wants a person to have a rational, justified position that they're arguing for. Nothing wrong with that. It's not that hard to justify the claim there's a God or there's not a God. Those two claims are easily justified as belief states. Knowledge is going to be a little bit different. If you're claiming knowledge, I'm going to have a long conversation with you as a theist or an atheist of how you got there. I'm not saying that you're right or wrong because I don't know how you would ever get there with knowledge because how you going to show anything? How are you going to argue that the proposition is true? It's kind of circular by saying, well, I know it's true because it's true. It's self-circular. So I don't know. It's going to be very hard to demonstrate to any kind of level where you can justify the propositions being true or false as a knowledge claim. I mean, maybe you can, but even then it doesn't mean that you actually have the knowledge, right? Even if an atheist or theist, hypothetically, can justify their knowledge claim, and maybe they can. I'm not going to argue that they can. I'm just going to say it's very difficult. Maybe even some have. But that doesn't mean that their claim is correct. It just means they've argued to the point where they're reasonably justified to make the argument that they know God exists or know God does not exist. But it's very confusing because now if you have an atheist that says, I know there is no God, and you're a theist that says, I know there is a God, and they both argue their position really well, one of them has to be wrong. Right? One of their claims has to be incorrect. And so I think it's a lot more difficult when you throw in these knowledge claims. But for belief, yeah, why would you not want an atheist just to go, yeah, look, dude, your claim is wrong. Let me show you why it's false. We do that all the time for everything else, Professor Plink. When a creationist says, hey, look, the age of the earth is 6,000 years old, most of them go, wait, no. And we'll show them why. We don't just say we don't believe you. We say you're wrong. The age of the earth is around 4.54 billion years, plus or minus a couple 100 million years, right? So we don't just sit there and go, we don't believe you. We tell them they're wrong and show them they're wrong using evidence and reason and logic. Why is being an atheist any different? It's not that hard to justify atheism. I don't know why people are scared of it. You own your burden. Don't be listening to the Matt Dillahunties of the world. Because atheism doesn't have a burden of proof. Yes, it does. Even in the lack of belief, it still has a burden of proof, which I've shown in my blog, but we're not going to get into that. But own it, because Matt Dillahunty, he believes there's no God, right? Aaron Robb believes there's no God. Heck, he goes one step further. He goes 2 steps further. He goes 3 steps further. He's not just I believe there's no God. Aaron's like, I know there's no God. I'm certain there's no God, and gods are impossible. Oh, that's whoa, way up here. He went from merely, yeah, I believe there's no God to, oh, yeah, they're impossible. That bar is so high, there is no possible way that Aaron is. If Aaron could actually demonstrate that bar of impossibility, he would be the most famous philosopher on the planet. He would be the number one person in philosophy of religion. He would make Oppie look like a complete idiot if he could do that. So I don't see that happening. There's just no way you can. It'd be. I mean, even using modal logic, you to prove that God is impossible, would be monumental. And again, if you start off with a contradiction. Like you posit a type of God that has an internal contradiction, then that particular local is impossible. That's not hard to do. If I say, hey, God is the God of square circles, God is a square circle. Yeah, I can prove that doesn't exist, right? That's a contradiction. That's not. Those are trivial. I'll call those trivial cases, right? But anyways, let's continue more here.
But atheists don't have any such requirement.
Why?
One does not have to prove a lack of a belief.
Again, first of all, Professor Plink, you only have to prove something if that's your claim that you can prove something. Then you have an onus to. And if you don't, then somebody just goes, okay, whatever. I'm not going to evaluate your claim, right? You can't say that they're wrong, right? You can't say, oh, I'm not going to evaluate your claim and you're wrong. That would be kind of silly. But you can't say I'm not going to bother your claim. But I guess maybe you could. If you actually knew their claim was wrong, you're like, look, your claim is wrong. I can prove you're wrong, right? If somebody says X does not equal X, you don't have to listen to their claim to know that they're wrong, right? Claim X equals X. And so an atheist or theist only have to prove something if they say, look, I can prove this to be the case. I can prove 0.99 repeating is equal to 1. Many different ways. I use that as my go-to, and I will always use that my go-to because it's objective. I can prove that. And you say, hey, Steve, prove it. Like, I'm not interested in convincing you. Okay, I only have to have an epistemic justification to myself that I understand it well enough where I can prove it. And I make that claim. I'm just telling you that, yes, I can prove it. Am I going to? No. I don't have any onus to anybody to demonstrate that I can prove 0.99 repeating equals 1. You have a right at that point to believe that I can't. Or to withhold judgment, your call. Again, if I'm not trying to convince you, you can say, yeah, Steve doesn't actually know how to do that kind of math. But if I wanted to convince you, then I go, okay, yes, I said I can prove it. Let me show you. And by the way, all you have to do is go to my blog, and I have my proof up there. So My blog has that proof. So I can do it. But I have no onus generally to convince anybody of anything. These are called persuasionary burdens, right? Or just even discursory burdens. I don't have a burden to have a discussion with somebody I don't want to talk to. So atheists have no burden to prove anything unless they say, yes, I can prove this. Theists, the same thing. They have no burden to prove anything unless they say it. But even saying you don't believe, you have an epistemic burden of why you withheld affirmation. Why is it you didn't come to a conclusion? If I just said to my audience, X equals X, and I got John Foley going out there, I don't believe you, Steve. I'm not convinced X equals X. I'm going to be thinking, hey, John, guess what? You're an idiot. I'm going to be like, what do you mean you're not convinced X equals X? I'm going to be thinking he's probably not very intelligent. Because his belief on that is not contingent upon me giving him reasons to it. I don't have to give him reasons to believe X equals X. He can formulate it by other means, right? And so if he was to say, I just lack a belief that X equals X, you're going to think he's not very intelligent, right? Think about that. So it means very little to say you don't believe in something, especially when you probably should, like X equals X. So you need to justify why you don't believe X equals X, John Foley. Explain to me why you cannot come to a rational conclusion because you're over, 4 of why X equals X. You're not convinced by it. And I'm just using John as an example, obviously. But you see how silly it is to say merely because you don't believe something, you don't have a burden of proof? Of course you do. And a burden of proof in epistemology, as we understand it, is a justification. Not a matter of proving in a court of law. Not a matter of doing a deductive or inductive proof. It is just, what are your reasons why you believe something, disbelieve it, or suspend judgment? Again, going back to those 3 epistemic dispositions that Oppu was saying, the reason to use atheism as a positive case fits into, that he finds as a better schema. That's the schema that he's talking about. That fits in that perfectly. You justify why you believe, you justify why you don't disbelieve, and you justify why you suspend judgment. You justify why you do not believe something. There's nothing wrong with that.
And
well, yeah, John, as John points out, it is a metaphysical fact that if you are English, you do sound smarter than everybody else, and you probably increases your IQ points. Give it at least 5 or 6, maybe. So yes, the English accent makes you sound smarter. I get it. And then the redneck accent in the South makes you sound dumber. We got the short end of the stick on that one for the Americans. I get it.
If the theists can just manage to turn all of atheism into a positive belief, then the atheists would be on the defensive in order to support their position.
And what's wrong with that, Professor Plink? You haven't made an argument why that is bad. You just stated it. Well, that would put atheism as on the defensive. So what? That's good. Let them defend it. And they can. My audience can. My audience that listens to this video, whether it live or in the future, if they're an atheist, I can tell you right now, they will probably tell you, hey, look, Professor Plink, there isn't a God. Let me tell you why. Not a big deal. Not that difficult.
So if they can just get it to change from atheism means a lack of a belief in any God or gods, and turn it into atheism means believing that there is no God or gods, then suddenly they can attack the positive beliefs of the atheists and be on the rhetorical offensive.
Well, again, what's wrong? So what? That's how you have a discussion, Professor Plink. When you do a debate, usually you have a central thesis that you're debating, and there are different types of debates. Even in the argument style is different between certain debates. But usually somebody picks a pro and a con. And the best debates are the debates where somebody picks the pro. We should do this. We know this is good. The other one says, no, this is bad. We shouldn't do this. Because those are binary, right? Same thing with God's existence. Either we should or we shouldn't, right? Binary. God exists or God does not exist is binary. So if somebody's arguing God exists, it's so much better to have somebody on the opposite side say, no, God does not exist, right? Because what else are you arguing? I mean, yeah, sure, you can argue, and in some cases, like if you're submitting a thesis, right? You're arguing for your defensive thesis that why somebody should accept and not accept it, as opposed to reject or think it's false. I get that. Or if you're just talking to an audience, you're just giving them arguments. You're not you're not getting a positive feedback. You're not getting a rebuttals. Sure, but generally speaking, the best arguments are this is the case, and this is the case, and they're contradictions to each other. Don't you think that? If an atheist is saying, "Look, let me explain why there's no God," and a theist is saying, "Let me explain why there is," those are the best discussions. Not somebody who says, "Yeah, I don't believe you." Yeah, nope, I don't believe you. Nope, I just lack a belief. No, those are boring. Right? You want to have the opposite sides of something. You want two people to take opposite positions. Right? Now, again, that's not always the case, but I think those are the best.
For a change. But it's not going to work, fellas. You don't get to redefine words as you like
but
to
you
make
are.
your rhetorical position stronger.
Wait. But Professor Plink, you haven't addressed the fact that atheism for 400 years has been the belief that God does not exist. That is the standard usage in Stanford, Oxford, in Cambridge, in everywhere around the world. That's the standard usage. The only where you find it not standard in any college would be the lay speak. In the pockets of America where you have atheists going, we're using it as a lack of belief. Okay, but that's not academia. That's not philosophy. And even then, that's only been over the last several decades. Probably before Professor Plink was even born here. I don't know how old he is, but before he was born, atheism was not just a lack of belief. This is a relatively new phenomenon. And as I said, the update to Stanford Encyclopedia on the article of atheism makes note of this. The older versions didn't. If you go look back and read the 2011 version, 2007 version, which was by JJC Smart, and then the later versions were by Draper, but the even updated version, he notes it wasn't until recently this was even a thing. You never had to even worry. Was an Appia I think argued it too, didn't he? Let me think here. Yeah, maybe is it Draper or Appia that argued it? I don't know. I'm have to think about that. I'm pretty sure it's an SCP, but I'm pretty sure that one thing that Appia wrote, where he just said, "Hey, look, until a decade ago or two, we never had to worry about the word atheist if you saw it in the academic literature. It just meant God does not exist. But now it's like it's ambiguous, which makes it, to me, axiologically less valuable. That if you have to see a word in a textbook or something or paper, and you don't even know what that word is generally used as, and you're like, oh, what's the author mean by this? Because, it used to mean if the author said this is what it meant, and you didn't even have to think about it. But now the word's a little more vague. And we see this all the time. And by the way, I get that happens, right? The words sex versus gender, only until a few decades ago, meant the same thing. But now there's usages for gender that don't really mean sex. And there's nothing wrong with that. Right? Words move on and their usages change. I have no issue with that. I really don't. And so I don't have a problem with the word atheism having different usages. Matter of fact, atheism, some authors used to mean naturalism, believe it or not. Yeah. That, believe it or not, some authors in their paper, when they said the word atheism, they were talking about naturalism, which obviously doesn't make much sense to us, but back then it probably did that to them. Because you can have atheism, but not the denial of the supernatural. You can have an atheist who believes, in magic. You can have an atheist that believes in spirits or ghosts or goblins or vampires or whatever. They're not mutually exclusive things. Now, if you are a naturalist, a philosophical naturalist, that would obviously entail atheism epistemically, right? Or at least imply. There's an epistemic we'll call it an epistemic implicature there, that if you believe there are no such things in supernatural to be rational, you would believe there's no God, right? It would make no sense to say, hey, look, the supernatural set is empty. There's nothing in the supernatural set, but I believe in God as a supernatural being. There's a contradiction there. Yeah, it's ambiguous now, and it shouldn't be. But Professor Plink doesn't realize that's because of atheists doing to that, not theists. Let me reiterate that for the people in the far back right there, way back there. Yo, you back there. It was the atheists that have been trying to change how atheism is used in common parlance, in general application, and even in academic literature, which they failed. It has been the atheist doing that, not the theist. I challenge anybody to find otherwise. I've read these papers. I can tell you right now, it was atheists trying to do that. It has been atheists trying to do that for at least 20 years. And the last 10 years that I've been actively talking about this topic. Oh, yeah. You ain't thug life, Professor. Yeah, you ain't thug. You got some basic stuff wrong. You've got the Greek alpha primitive wrong. You've got the understanding of atheism and agnosticism wrong as relationship to Gnosticism. Yeah, let's put it this way. I wouldn't trust you to teach a 5-year-old about these topics. Now, anyways, let's, I know it's getting late. I wanted to keep this under an hour, but let me read these real quick. What time I start this? 4 something? What time I start this? About 4:10, I guess. Okay. So this is what he wrote. He said, can you guys see this on the outside? Make sure you guys can. It's a little small, but you can read it. He says, FYI, I'm aware that the man giving his definition of atheism in the second video is Graham Oppie. That's Dr. Graham Oppie, but yes. And that he's an atheist himself. The original video was Atheist Professor Gives a Real Definition of Atheism. Well, it is, but again, these are scribed usages, right? And then he says, so I did know he was an atheist. Oh, you're just super smart. He's, like I said, the most amazing atheist philosopher on the planet, but whatever. And didn't mean to give the impression that he was. You did, and people took it that way, but I'm glad you corrected. The cringe creationist in question is Cameron Bertuzzi. Oh, Cameron can be cringe. I'll give him that. I know Cameron. He can be cringe, but not for this. Sorry, Cameron. The person interviewing him, because he has been on a run for years trying to insist that agnostic atheists don't exist and eliminate all people who lack a belief in God from the conversation. Okay, first of all, agnostic atheist is a completely different subject, which is not part of your video here. Second of all, I don't think I've really heard Cameron talk about that much. I am your worst nightmare on that, because I am the one who has written extensively against the uses of agnostic atheism. I am the one that Matt Dillahunty basically has used my arguments, whether explicitly or tacitly or through other people. It doesn't matter, because he always seems to mention my name on this subject, but it's because of my arguments, and of course other people too. It wasn't just me, but primarily me, that Matt Dillahunty changed his position, where he thinks agnostic atheism is no longer something he should use as a self-referenced moniker or title or label, because it's nonsensical in the weak case. I've shown this to be the case years and years and years ago. So I don't know why Cameron really is involved with that, but whatever. But if Cameron is, yeah, Cameron's right on that. Sorry, Professor. The term agnostic atheism is nonsensical. It really is. In many different ways. I've talked about it in my blog countless times about why, but no intelligent atheist that really wants to be taken seriously should ever use terms or phrases like agnostic atheist. It's just two words that should not be juxtaposed like that, because it's so ambiguous that it cannot be de-ambiguated without asking multiple questions. It means too many things to too many people, and it logically cannot be put in a coherent structure where it makes sense. I've tried. Now, if you can do it, more power to you, and I will review your logic. And maybe you can. Maybe look, I'm not saying it's impossible to make a coherent structure on it. What I'm arguing is nobody's done so far. One or two people have tried, but they've ended up failing when they came to the same point that I came to when I tried. You know, whenever you get to a certain point to make this logical schema work on a quad multi-axial system using 4 domains, you run into a problem. And anybody who's tried has run into the same problem, because you're changing the object of the epistemic modifier in multiple different ways when you cannot do that. You need to keep it the same if you have an epistemic modifier. Basically, imagine saying this: the red dog versus the dog. Okay, you have the dog, and I want to modify that dog with red, the red dog. Okay, you can do that. But what happens if you look at those quad multi-axial diagrams? They take dog and they turn it into something else, like cat. They'll say dog, the red cat. No, that's not the same object that you started with. And anybody who's looked into this will know exactly what I'm talking about, because the object is lack of belief. You can't change belief and lack of belief interchangeably like that. Either you believe there's a God, and you can epistemically modify that with Gnostic. If you want to use Gnostic in this way as an adjective, okay, I don't like it, but my feelings are irrelevant. It doesn't mean it's not sensical. It does make sense to say Gnostic atheist. I agree with that. But the reason why it makes sense is if you use Gnostic to mean I'm not just believing there's a God, I'm claiming knowledge. I'm raising that to a knowledge level. Okay, there's meaning to that. I don't like it, but screw me, right? Screw my feelings. It's not meaningless. But the problem is, in order to do that, Professor, what's your name? Plink? Yeah, Professor Plink. The problem with doing that is that in order to raise atheism to a knowledge claim, you first must have a belief claim, because knowledge is a subset of belief. So if I want to say I know God exists from a I believe God exists, you must start with I believe God exists. You cannot start with merely I do not believe in God and then raise that to, oh, I know God exists, like it does in the quad operational format that you have in those multi-axial diagrams. It doesn't work. Every one of them has to be the belief God exists, believe God does not exist, for it to be coherent, to be unambiguated. I'm telling you this. I'm just telling you this. And anybody who knows logic and epistemology will look at this and agree. I think I haven't found anybody that hasn't. I know that Dr. Josh Rasmussen agrees with me on this, and hopefully he'll have some time to maybe rewrite the wiki page on it, and maybe we can do something together on it. He likes my paper, by the way. But anyways, yeah. So agnostic atheism, agnostic atheist. I don't know when we don't want to eliminate all people. That just sounds bad. Hey, you're a Gnostic atheist. I'm not advocating violence. I would never do this. YouTube. Not a violent person. It's a joke. But I'm just saying. Why would you eliminate all people? No, you're eliminating the uses of a bad phrase, right? That's all. You're not eliminating all people. But I just hear a person who says, oh, I'm an agnostic atheist. The first thing I think to myself is this person is an idiot. This person is uneducated in this particular field. There are some exceptions. I know Bart Ehrman uses the term. He uses it in a very specific way, which he can. But he's not a philosopher of religion. He is a theologian, professor, atheist, historian kind of guy, But he's obviously extremely educated, but he's one of the very few that will use that phrase. But any other person you find on the street, for the most part, or on the social media highway, and when you're walking down it and you hear just somebody in a video say, yeah, I'm an agnostic atheist, or you read it, oh, I'm an agnostic atheist, the first thing that comes to my mind is this person's an idiot. I don't know how else to take it any longer. But again, screw me. My feelings don't matter. But he also goes on and says, he and other theists are trying to use definitions like the one offered by Oppie here to say negative and soft theism don't exist. Well, they exist. People use them. Of course they exist. What do you mean they don't exist? Cameron may be a troll sometimes, but he's certainly not an idiot. He would never say that they don't exist. Certainly they do, but that doesn't mean that they're rational. That doesn't mean that you should use them. If the problem is here, Professor Plink, if you have negative or soft atheism, and I will use them interchangeably, I'm fine with that. You also have negative and soft theism. Yeah, you do. You cannot have one without the other. It's not rational. If you have soft atheism, it only follows you have to allow a theist to have soft theism. And I have proven, using logic, if you do not have a positive epistemic status, you are a soft atheist who doesn't believe there's a God. You are also a soft theist. They're the same position. Soft atheism, soft theism, agnosticism are the same exact logical position. There are other factors in how these positions are. There's epistemic factors. That's why you generally have to use what's called an Euler diagram than a Venn. But I used a Venn to explain it because it's simpler. But I also made an Euler diagram to explain it even more so, because the Euler diagram takes into account specificities of the individual labels, right? Like for example, an agnostic is somebody who suspends judgment after they've evaluated the claim and hopelessly come deadlock, right? They can't formulate a conclusion whether the proposition is true or not, so they're agnostic. But that's after they've evaluated it, right? But a baby has never evaluated the claim, so they can't say they're agnostic, but they still have the same logical position as the agnostic. They neither believe nor neither believe. So you can't just define a position by what the logic is. And I get that. You can't just say, look, this person neither believes nor disbelieves, therefore agnostic. No, because there are other factors that make them agnostic. They've evaluated the proposition. They're no longer innocent. And Dr. Jane Friedman points this out in her really great paper I highly recommend, 2010 or 11, I think it was, called Suspending Judgment. Excellent paper. And so, what I just argue is that it collapses the same logical form. Agnostic, weak atheism and weak theism all collapse the same form. That's all I argue. Kawasa for 10,001, super chat. I just hope people realize polysemous or polysemous, however you want to say it. I say polysemous. I've heard people say polysemous. I don't care. Polysemous does not mean all different definitions are equally valid and sound. Well, yes and no. First of all, valid and sound refers to an argument, right? To a deductive argument. A valid deductive argument means that it forms some kind of argument structure that the conclusion must necessarily follow by the rules of inference. And then if the soundness is the case, then that means it is both valid and the premises are true. You can be valid but not sound, but you cannot be sound without valid. But that doesn't, we're talking about a definition or something like that. We're not really using words like valid and sound because they're not really applicable there. What we're using is coherent, axiologically valuable, right? I mean, if I say that I want atheism to mean the position that we're alone in the universe with there's no aliens, right? We're alone in the universe. When it comes to alien life, it doesn't really make sense to do that, right? You could if you wanted to. I mean, there's words, right? But that's not how the word is used, right? When somebody says, "Hey, what do you think about aliens?" And you're like, I'm an atheist on that. Yeah, no, you can say you're agnostic on that. You neither believe or disbelieve. That's fine. But the term atheist in the philosophical realm of philosophy of religion is going to be on the proposition of God existing, not aliens, right? So sure, you can have different polysemous usages, and even atheism as naturalism is polysemous. Atheism as merely not believing in God is polysemous, and people do use it that way. What I think is better to say is not equally either rational, because again, I think that lack of belief atheism leads to not just ambiguities, but I think it leads to paradoxes, or at least absurdity. I say paradox. I think absurdities, like rocks are atheism, or rocks are atheists. That's an absurdity. And yes, it does. I'm sorry. These people are arguing that, you can limit the scope to a person. It doesn't get you out of it, trust me. Go look at set theory. If you make atheism the exact same term as not theist or non-theism, then you have atheism would contain everything that's not a theist, including rocks. So you can't get away from that by limiting the scope in a subset. You're still in that superset. So once you're in that superset of theist or not theist, and everything that's not a theist would be like a rock, because a rock's not a theist. So, and now you define a non-theist to be atheist. Now everything in that superset is an atheist, including a rock. So anything you do as a subset to limit it in scope to say, well, I mean a person here, that's still in the superset. Can't get away with it. So I would say that even though that people realize now after me putting out for years that atheism is polysemous, and I got so much pushback on that, Kawasa. Atheists you remember, atheists like, no, atheism is not polysemous. Atheism is one thing. It's God, the lack of belief in God. That was it. That's what they say. Only one thing. American Atheist still says, it doesn't say only, but it says it's one thing. Atheism is one thing, a lack of belief in God. But you have a lot of atheists going, it's only one thing. And it wasn't until later on when myself and other people started going, no, it's not just one thing. That's how you're using it, but this is how it's used, generally speaking, in academia, is the belief that God does not exist. They wouldn't accept that. Like, no, only theists use that. Yeah, they actually argued, no atheist would ever use it that way. Really? Well, Dr. Oppie is an atheist. Every paper I've ever read uses it that way for the most part. Like, I would say 99% of the papers I read use atheism that way, unless they're arguing not to use it that way, in which case it's an opinion piece, right? Then he goes on to say, he and other theists are trying to use definitions like the one offered by Oppie here to use to say negative theism doesn't exist. And though Oppie and I are both atheists, I disagree with this definition. Well, are you? You're both labeling yourself atheist, but I don't know what your position is because you're vague now. You've watered down the term atheist, Professor Plink, that I don't know what you mean by it. I know what Dr. Oppie means by it. When he says he's an atheist, he means he believes there's no God. When you say you're an atheist because you use what's called sensu lato, or general usages, broad usages, I don't know what you mean by it. You could mean anything by it. Because you like to not have nuance. You like to not have precision. And people like Dr. Oppie and myself like to have precision, at least in these types of terms. So when you say Dr. Oppie and I are both atheists, in name only, maybe, but I don't know what your actual position is. I have no idea. And that's a problem. And I bet my audience wouldn't know either, unless they've watched your stuff and they'll say, well, you either believe there's no God or your other position is agnostic. You only got three choices here, right? Three rational epistemic dispositions: believe, disbelieve, or suspend judgment. Dr. Oppie doesn't suspend judgment. Dr. Oppie says there's no gods. Do you either believe there's no gods, or you believe there's a God, or you suspend judgment? That's it. And we know he's not a theist, so by process of elimination, Professor Plink is either logically an agnostic or logically an atheist in the philosophical sense. Which it is, I have no idea. That's a problem. Yeah, do you guys see that out there? That he's created a problem with ambiguity of his own making that has nothing to do with theist? It's because I don't know what he means by atheist any longer. And I would have to ask him, well, do you hold the position that is false? The proposition of theist is false? And if he doesn't, then he's stuck being agnostic like me. At least agnostic on P is called. He can label himself anything he wants, but he's more like me than he is Oppie. He's just calling that atheist. But I doubt that's the case. Most people that say that they're agnostic, I find after I quiz them, don't really take the agnostic position. They really do believe there's no God. They'll say things like, gods don't exist, gods are impossible, gods are figments of people's imagination, gods are myth. And in the same token say, well, I'm not claiming there's no God. Yeah, you are. You're not just lacking a belief at that point. All right. So then I just basically tell him, which I haven't got a reply on. This was a while ago. This was not just 1 second ago. I need to update. You see, I'll just refresh. Let's see if it's updated.
So,
nope, not good. So now I said, agnostic atheists I have shown to be nonsensical in the weak case and superfluous and or ambiguous in the strong. You can disagree with Oppie, but you have not assailed any of his reasoning nor my arguments. I will be doing a review of this today, which is now, and probably will tag you, which I did. And then I said, this was 6 days ago, so I've been stewing in this for a while. I say, wow, this was Cringe talking about the Greek alphabet privative. If you, quote, we're almost there. But you were absolutely wrong here. It is not as a negation. It is not as a negation, and in logic, that means the proposition. The proposition. This is where you make a very basic puerile error in logical understanding. If not is a negation of P, then it is not P. And you predict, and if you predicate P with the dosastic disposition of belief, which is an intentional verb, meaning it has to be somebody doing the believing for some object, right? It's an intentional verb. You have BP, which means believes proposition for theism, and believes not P for atheism. You're completely incorrect here, as you are erroneously attempting to negate the predication, which is the belief, and not the proposition. And I'm not a theist. You are getting lambasted by atheists right now, which he was on Twitter, trying to infer that Dr. Graham Oppie, who is one of the most well-respected and well-known contemporary atheist philosophers of our time, is some type of theist. You really missed it. You really messed here, mate. Feel free to message me and learn more about atheism properly. And he never did. But he did clarify above here that he wasn't referring to Oppie as a theist. And like I said, I will take his word for that, right? But anyways, let's kind of wrap it up here. Let me see what my live chat's saying. John says validity and soundness refers to syllogistic arguments. Yes. And by the way, for somebody out there the other day, I was trying to explain to them, and they blocked me over this, but if you have something that is valid, you do not have induction any longer. Induction cannot be valid. Induction must be invalid, believe it or not. And soundness only refers to deductive arguments. See, soundness does not refer to inductive. You have cogency for inductive arguments. So cogency must be between greater than 50%, but less than 100%. Once you have 100%, you become valid. And that no longer is inductive. It is deductive in nature. And so I was trying to explain to somebody that, you know, they were arguing about the soundness and validity of an inductive argument. I'm like, you're using these terms wrong. You cannot have a valid or sound inductive argument. It's not possible. Because you're not deductively arguing something. The rules do not have to necessarily follow to the conclusion in an inductive argument. In fact, it can't. It literally can't, because once you have an argument where you have all the premises are true with a rule of inference that makes it valid, you're no longer doing an inductive argument. You're doing a deductive one, right? So they were a little confused on that. Anyways, I'm going to wrap this up so people can easily digest this. I want to thank Kawasa for the super chat. If you want to donate to the channel, please leave a thank you. What do they call them? A thanks on the comment section. I will read them out. If you want to become a member of the channel, please do. You get that cool little green name. I want to thank Kim Waki for showing up, my moderator, and I think another one was earlier. I didn't see where they went though. Maybe they did. But anyways, yeah, sorry. I kind of like, I may have been a little all over the place on this one. I don't mean to be, but I just get sick of this stuff. Professor Plink doing a cringe complimation. Yeah, I get that. Creationists are cringe, but don't reduce yourself to that level, because Professor Plink is literally being the cringe of philosophy right now. And that's when I and others have stepped in and go, dude, you're way off base here, and you're just wrong. And so until atheists start actually reading the literature and understanding this, they're going to make these types of mistakes. And I don't like to see that happening, because they are still a non-theist, and I'm a non-theist, and so it makes us all look bad. With that, I'll leave you guys to whatever it is you're doing tonight. I have the day off and I have tomorrow off, and I'm well resting. I am doing non sequitur tomorrow with the amazing, the wonderful, the but ugly Superman, I guess you'd call him, from Florida, rocket launch dude, Red's Rhetoric. We're going to be doing the state of the great shape debate. In other words, we're going to be talking about the state of flat Earth. There's been some recent changes. No, Earth is still flat. Or not flat. Sorry. Somebody quote me on that. Steve said the Earth is flat. No, the Earth is still not flat. It is very round. It is an oblate irregular spheroid. So no, flat earthers are not one. In fact, just the opposite. They are waning. We're going to be talking about why they're waning. We're talking about the loss of some more flat earthers that have passed away. And just basically the state of the shape of the debate and what's going on with it, because we're all seeing flat earth being not as prevalent as it once was on YouTube. And one of the reasons is because they're not making any money off of it, because even YouTube said, yeah, you guys are just idiots. We don't want this kind of stuff on our platform. I agree with YouTube to some degree. But, you know, I'm not against. I said the problem is it's bad information. But at the same token, I'm not a free speech absolutist, but I'm not for censorship either. If a person wants to make an idiot of themselves on YouTube and promote flat Earth, they kind of have a right to, I think. But they're not going to get monetized for it, and that's YouTube's call, right? That they can monetize or demonetize whatever the hell they want. And I understand why they demonetize it, and I kind of agree with that though. Right? Because if you put out willful misinformation, why should you get paid for it? And what they should have done, hey, let me tell you, flat earthers, and I'll bring this up tomorrow. If you're smart, because most of you guys oppose anyways, right? Most of them actually believe in flat earth. But if you're smart, you should now do flat earth comedy. So promote flat earth under comedy, and maybe you might get monetized, because now it's satire, even though you're actually promoting it. It's like clandestine. You're really trying to promote flat earth because you're an idiot, but you're doing it under the guise of comedy. Win-win. I want to cut your action though on that. Okay. So I'm doing non sequitur 5 o'clock Pacific. I know it's real late for you over there, John. But that's the time Reds is available. And I'm also going to be on, again, Trinity Radio at noon with Dr. Braxton Hunter. Really looking forward to that. Discussing my paper. You head on over there and subscribe to Braxton if you can, and get notified of that event. And then my paper is linked in his video description now, so go check it out if you haven't read it already. I think everybody here has read my paper. So, but let me know. I think 2016, 2019, I agree, outdone is when flat Earth kind of peaked, and then we were riding that wave on non sequitur. Then other people took that over when we kind of fell apart on non sequitur. And more power to them. Look. When there's a topic and there's a hole to be filled, there's a power vacuum, somebody fills it. I don't begrudge that at all. I really don't. But it was non sequitur that really started promoting that stuff back in the day. We weren't the only ones, but we were a front runner. But it's nice to have Reds back tomorrow. I miss talking to that guy. We're going to have fun. We're going to do some mockery and just talk about, the state of the Great Shape Debate is what I'm calling it. I think that's a pretty cool title. But like I said, let me know what you guys think. Please promote this video. Think about becoming a member of the channel or super thanks.
I don't know that one.
I didn't ask you. Oh, Alexa, she always wants to be included in the conversation. But I might do another one of these tonight if I get really bored. We'll see. I have another video that I want to do from Emerson Green, which is really good. He does a podcast, and I really like this video. What was this podcast name? It's called Counterapologetics. That's what it is. And I might do that later. If not, I'll do it tomorrow or whenever. But I'm enjoying my day off today. Today's really the first long day off I've had. So appreciate you guys showing up. Appreciate hanging out with me. Let me know what you guys think of what I put out. Let me know if you think the Professor Plink is cringe when it comes to philosophy or not. And if not, let me know why. But let me tell you, if you're going to tell me that I'm wrong, the first thing I'm going to be asking for is show me any university that why I'm wrong. Show me an academic level paper that I'm wrong. I don't want to hear Google. I don't want to hear Wiki. I don't want to hear fruit on the ground level stuff. Show me that Dr. Oppie's wrong. Show me Dr. Draper's wrong. Show me Dr. McCormick's wrong. Show me Dr. Burgess Jackson's wrong. Show me Dr. Demi's wrong. Show me with evidence, and we'll talk. But if you just say I'm wrong and you cite me Google, you're not going to be worth my time for a response, probably. So with that, thanks for joining me, guys. And like I said, please help share this video. It really does make a difference. And we'll see you tomorrow or tonight.